Welcome to the College Football Bros, the podcast ranking SEC quarterbacks. And now, here are your hosts, Michael, Ryan, and Trey Newman.
Welcome to the College Football Bros podcast. I am Michael Newman, and I'm joined by Jamie Newman's brother.
Yes, that's me, Ryan Newman.
And by Jamie Newman's other brother.
That would be me, Trey Newman. Now, Michael, this week you've kept us to Trask, and you didn't have to nix Ryan or I.
Okay, all right. Good work. I mean, I guess that kind of seals the deal on the week here.
Yeah, very good. Very
all
good.
Right, we have finally made it to the SEC quarterback rankings. We're going to rank all 14 of the projected starting quarterbacks. And a little teaser here, all three of us chose different quarterbacks for number one, so get to that later in the episode. But let's start out with an unsurprising number 14, Trey.
Yep, hailing from Vanderbilt, Ken Seals. Yeah, that picture doesn't actually make me invoke a lot of confidence either.
He's a freshman.
Yeah, he's a baby. But just unfortunately with the way Vanderbilt has played the past couple seasons, particularly last season, and they're not projected to do much more this year. This last spot's kind of reserved, unfortunately, for their quarterback. There's no guarantee it will be Seals. Mason brought in a couple JUCO transfers, and there are some freshmen as well. There's a new offensive coordinator. There's a lot of change right now, and it might just kind of be shuffling the deck on the Titanic at this point. We'll see.
Yeah. We all had them last. The four quarterbacks that are in the race are all unknowns and not super highly recruited. So hard to know what to expect, but not much.
It's weird seeing a school bring in four QBs.
That is in one class. Yeah, that's a lot of quarterbacks.
Smells of desperation.
Yeah, hopefully one of them's good, but yeah, we'll see.
Yep. All right, let's move on to our 13th overall guy. We got Shawn Robinson, host of 90 Day Fiancé.
I don't watch that show.
Yeah, I figured you didn't, but had to put it in there. A very select group of people might get that. Maybe nobody in this that listens to this podcast. But anyways, yeah. So I had him at 12th, which was, I guess, slightly higher, but it's not necessarily his job. I mean, it's not a guarantee. They got Taylor Powell and coming back. I think he'll be a junior, and Connor Bazelak. I don't know. Anyways, Shawn Robinson appears to be the guy at this point. Didn't exactly tear it up at TCU, but we've kind of seen that it's TCU was a tough situation. Threw too many picks, wasn't very consistent, but he did throw over 300 yards against Ohio State a couple of years ago. So signs of life, but hard to be confident in him.
Yeah, I mean, he could end up this season a few slots higher, because the one thing he does have is running ability. So that's kind of a sure asset. He had over 5 yards per carry at TCU. And he was young when he played at TCU. And then, like you said, not a great supporting cast there. Not a lot of quarterbacks have succeeded. So I don't think just because he's 13th doesn't mean he's bad.
No, and hopefully with the influence of Eli Drinkowitz, maybe he can be a little bit more of a QB whisperer and elevate Robinson's game.
Okay. Number 12 on our list is Ryan Hilinski at South Carolina. And he, of course, started as a true freshman last year after Jake Bentley went down. And for the most part, really struggled. He looked like a true freshman. So if he doesn't improve, significantly this year, which I guess you would expect him to take a step forward, but I would not at all be surprised to see Colin Hill, the grad transfer from Colorado State, get the starting job at some point, because he, of course, played for Mike Bobo, the new offensive coordinator at South Carolina. He was, of course, the head coach of Hill at Colorado State. And when Hill was healthy there, he played pretty well. The problem is he was frequently unhealthy. He's had a lot of knee injuries. So we'll just have to wait and see if Hilinski struggles, then I think you'll see Hill.
Yeah, I think you'll see him struggle probably. I would be very surprised if we didn't see Hill at some point throughout the year. It's, it just you don't have much to work with. It's just such a tough, and you have had such a tough schedule. It's very tough to deal with. And at least Bentley had a guy like Deebo Samuel. I mean, that was at least one weapon for him. But now it's a tough hand. So I don't think Hilinski's a top tier guy. So yeah, I would expect. I'm expecting Colin Hill to eventually take over.
But maybe the influence of Bobo will help Hilinski at least develop into a little bit more and live up to some of the hype that he had coming out of high school. That's the hope if you're a Gamecock fan.
Yeah, he was highly recruited, so that potential is still there.
Okay, moving on to number 11 out of Kentucky, Terry Wilson. He was out most of last year with injury, and that's why wideout Lynn Bowden played majority of the year. Wilson is not much of a threat with his arm, but he's athletic. He just has a knack for making the plays when needed to. He didn't always look pretty when he was in there in the past couple of years, but he always seemed to do just enough. And hopefully for Wildcat fans, the time off helped him develop into a little bit more of a passing threat.
What do you think, Ryan?
Yeah, I actually had him 9th, which was I don't know. I guess I was surprised that I maybe put him that high, or surprised that I was higher than you guys on him. But I don't know. His numbers are obviously not that great, and they didn't really ask a whole lot of him. But I at the same time, we've seen him come through in some big moments, in some big games. I mean, just for instance, a couple years ago, they won at Florida, which Kentucky had never done or something. It was just he came up through big in that game. So I give him credit for making some big plays in some big games. And, he led that 2018 team to a top 15 finish. So he's proven that he can at least, I don't know, be a quarterback on a good team.
Yeah, he's fine. I think one reason for me I was lower than you on him is that season, that 10-win season a couple years ago. Their offense, according to SP Plus, was actually the worst in the SEC, and that was with Benny Snell and a good offensive line to help him out. So, I just think maybe your ceiling is not super high when Wilson's your quarterback. He just not enough explosive plays through the air, but he does help out in the run game, and he's efficient in the short passing game. So it's not all bad.
That was a fun year for actually the last 2 years have been pretty fun for Kentucky. That 2 years ago they were pulling games out of their hat. Like I remember they played a game at Missouri where it was like, whoa, how did they win that? And then last year with Lynn Bowden, it was so fun to watch how that offense transformed.
Yep. And this year their offensive line is going to be really, really good again. So they could have another big year.
Yep. All right.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Number 10. Put her up there. Yeah, Myles Brennan probably looks to be the guy there for LSU. For me, he was probably maybe the hardest one to rank in the SEC, just obviously because we haven't seen enough of him. I put him 13th, so
I mean that is
pretty darn low. I don't have any issue with somebody putting him higher, and maybe I could have put him a little higher, but he hasn't sniffed really the field much during his first 3 years. And I know people will say like, oh, well, he's been behind Joe Burrow. So, can't be too hard on for that. But if you go back to 2018, Joe Burrow wasn't very good. Like you go look at in Joe Burrow's first 9 games of 2018, guess how many touchdowns he threw in those first 9 games?
11.
6.
Okay.
Like he was
6th.
not good. The offense was struggling. They weren't doing much. Brennan didn't get a chance. They still stuck with Burrow. I'm not super confident that Brennan's just going to come in and have a great year and keep up he's definitely not going to, he can't match Joe Burrow's year, but I worry either they lose Joe Brady, and I don't know. I'm afraid that they're just going to slip back into a little bit of where they were. I mean, they still have Jamar Chase and some good weapons, Marshall also, but I'm not confident yet with Brennan.
Now, before LSU fans jump through the screen and attack Ryan, 24/7 actually had him 13th as well, which really surprised me.
Really?
And they did their conference, but Brennan is one of the biggest wild cards in this conference because you ask yourself, did LSU lose too much around him, both on the field, and then you got also losing Joe Brady, or conversely, has LSU turned a corner and are they able to start consistently producing some above average or solid offenses. So I'm kind of on the fence. I had him right around where we have him now. It's just it's I don't know if it's all or nothing, but I'm really anxious to see it play out.
Yeah, it's definitely will be interesting to see. I think one thing that gives me a little bit of confidence in Brennan is that LSU didn't bring in a grad transfer. Like even if they couldn't get their top guy, if they were desperate for a quarterback, they could have brought somebody in, and they didn't. So I think they have some confidence in him. I mean, he's been with Ensminger for a few years now, and like you say, if Ensminger can continue this Joe Brady legacy even a little bit, then Brennan will have a big year with all the talent they have at receiver. All right, moving on to number 9 on our list is Jarrett Guarantano at Tennessee, and he's obviously going to have to hold off Brian Maurer, JT Shrout, and the big true freshman recruit Harrison Bailey. And this is a hard one for me to rank because, and I was the lowest on him at 11, which may be a bit harsh. I mean, when you look at his overall stats, they were pretty decent last year. They were pretty good, but he's just so inconsistent. Like he just would follow up a great game with a terrible game. So I know a lot of Tennessee fans are definitely on the fence about him, and they watch him every game. So they've had to live through those up and downs. I don't know. I just didn't know what to do with him.
Yeah, the inconsistency is definitely worrisome, but I mean, you saw what happened when he went out. It was even rougher. It was pretty rough. Like, so I think he's maybe a little underrated. And I think with a lot of the talent that they have coming back, I think they're going to improve a little bit that. And I think he's going to keep getting better. And I don't know. I just trust that he's going to have a much better overall year. I think it's going to be his team. He's got nothing to worry about. And I expect him to have a good year.
I mean, I was obviously high on the Vols last year. We know that, but for me going into this year, Guarantano, it's like I don't think there's much more of a ceiling. Like he can improve a little bit, but I'd be a little surprised if at the end of the year he was a top 4 SEC quarterback. I hope I'm wrong, but as I sit right here today, it would be tough for me to see.
Okay. Moving on to number 8.
Yep, we've got Rhys Plumlee from Ole Miss. I actually had him the highest at 7th, so just one peg ahead. I mean, he had some electric games as a freshman last year, specifically as a runner. I mean, in that LSU game, he had 212 yards on the ground. Not too bad. Up against the national champs. Now throw in a good offensive coach in Lane Kiffin. I'm expecting Plumlee to elevate his game in his sophomore year.
Yeah, I'm doubting it. I have him at 10th. He can't pass. It's you got to be. I mean, that picture of him was pretty appropriate. He was running and not throwing. I just think it's going to be an uphill battle, especially when teams are a little bit more ready for it. I don't know. I'm not buying. I don't know if he can ever be a consistent enough passer to really threaten the defenses that you really need to in the SEC. So I don't know. I'm lower than most, I think, on Plumlee.
Yeah, it's hard to say. Last year he had 154 pass attempts and 150 rush attempts. That's obviously not, or very unlikely to be the case this year. He's going to be passing more under Lane Kiffin, though I do trust Kiffin to adjust his offense to the talent he has at quarterback. He's done a good job of that in the past. So I guess I'm more optimistic than you, Ryan, on Plumlee just because of Lane Kiffin's coaching. And I mean, he ran for 1,000 yards last year. That's a huge trait to have if they can make use of it. I will say though, Matt Corral is still there too. So if Kiffin wants a better passer, he's an option.
Yep. All right, fair enough. Moving on.
Now it is time. No, Ryan. Sorry. It's time for a word from Trey.
Yeah, and I'm going to speak to you about the Patreon of the College Football Bros. We have a really good time with this. So first of all, if you'd like to donate or become a patron, you can go to patreon.com/collegefootballbros. There you'll find bonus episodes. We've got a bunch of those already there for you. You have access to our Discord. It's basically like a group chat. We have a lot of friendly banter, a lot of different fan bases in that group right now. We have a fun time with it on a daily basis. You also have access. We're going to do a fantasy league. We also do a pick'em league that's fun, and much more. So we highly encourage you to help out. If you really like the podcast, it'd be $5 a month. We still will always provide the free content that we do on a weekly basis, but this is just an added bonus if you really enjoy what the bros are spitting out at you.
Awesome. Till the end there when you talked about spitting on the listeners. I
Yeah,
didn't like
spitting
that.
on your face.
Yeah.
Yeah. Number 7.
Okay. Number 7.
All right, there he is, Feleipe Franks, the new guy in Fayetteville. I was high on him compared to the other bros here. I had him 5th. KJ Jefferson, I guess, is there, and he could give him a little bit of a battle, but Franks is expected to be the guy. And I had him that high because we've seen him play well. Led a team to a New Year's Six bowl win. Trey's shaking his head, but it's okay. He's stupid. So his freshman year,
Trey has Frank's 10th. So
this is the biggest discrepancy I think we've had of maybe all the episodes.
Yeah, that's a pretty big gap. But Franks is a tough one to judge because it's, we've seen good play from him. Dan Mullen obviously helped him out a lot with that. But when I compare what he did and to what Trask did, like, I don't think it was that big of a difference. Yeah, Trask was maybe slightly better, but I don't think it was like some light years difference where I could have, I think you have. Where do you have Trask, Trey?
We'll get there.
Oh yeah, we'll get there. Good point.
Well, he has him 10th. I think I said that.
No, Trask.
Oh,
but point being, like, that's a huge gap between wherever you have Franks and Trask, and I just don't see it that much. And I'm not, people are gonna say this year, well, Franks is obviously not going to have near the statistical year that Trask will because of the supporting cast. I mean, Arkansas is just not conducive to that where compared to Florida. But I don't know. I think Franks gets a bad rap, and even his own guys have turned on him in the past. But I think he's a little underappreciated.
I think Franks is a product of, or the success he had at Florida was a product of the system he was in with Mullen and the talent around him. He's good. I'm not saying he's not bad, but hold on a second. So Franks, he's also coming off of an injury. So there's a little bit of unknown there. I also build in the factor of he's going to Arkansas, which is not expected to have a very good season. And I have this image ingrained into me where in the first game last year when they played Miami in week 0, remember the screenshot where they went to Steve Spurrier because Feleipe Franks threw like one of the worst interceptions you've ever seen, and I just have that play like ingrained in my mind. Then you see Spurrier just like shaking his head. That was such a great. Go back and YouTube it if you don't know what I'm talking about. But personally, I'm just saying I think Franks hit his ceiling, and Mullen got the most out of him. But I understand your point, like when you're comparing Trask and Franks, but that's just the reason I had him low, just mainly because he's in a tough situation.
Yeah, I'm in between you guys on the ranking here. I do understand we saw Nick Starkel go to Arkansas, we saw Ben Hicks go there and flame out. So, and we thought they were pretty decent. But I will say I like Kendall Briles, the offensive coordinator there. So maybe it won't be as difficult a situation as we think.
Yeah, I might have been too harsh, Ryan.
Maybe.
Okay, number 6 on our list is Bo Nix from Auburn, and he had, he's of course started as a true freshman last year, and he had 58% completions, 6.7 yards per attempt. So he just wasn't very good last year statistically, and of course you expect some improvement given he was a 5-star recruit and he's going to be a sophomore, but I'm just not willing to project enough of an improvement to be a top 5 SEC quarterback. And I'm actually surprised he ended up at 6, but I might have had him 6th or 7th. So I guess that just tells you my lack of confidence in the bottom half of the SEC.
Yeah, Trey, where'd you have Bo? I had him 7th.
Yeah, we all had him in this range then. So we were no one was outlandish with Nix here.
Yeah. I think he'll be better this year. Obviously it's going into sophomore year, but he's got some good targets to throw to. He's got Seth Williams, Anthony Schwartz, and Eli Stove all coming back. So I know he's going to have a reworked offensive line, but those pass catchers are still going to be there, and those guys are good. So I think maybe the second year, Malzahn might open it up a little bit more for him, and we could see him make a big jump.
Yeah, Malzahn, and then also the old Arkansas head coach,
Chad Morris.
Yeah, so the influence of those two guys in year two, we talked about a little bit last week too. Nick's like, he had so much hype coming out of high school, and then also that first game against Oregon, he had that great last fourth quarter drive to lead the win, that he threw the touchdown pass, and it kind of really set the bar really high, and he could never obviously quite get to that level. He had a pretty good Iron Bowl, but other than that, he was kind of spotty. But I think where he is, it's a fair ranking considering how he performed last year.
Okay.
All right, moving on within the state of Alabama. Number 5, Mac Jones for the Tide. So I had him 5th where he stands. Ryan, you actually had him higher. We'll get to that in a sec. But so he finished the year at a very high level against Auburn and in the bowl game against Michigan. He did throw a couple costly picks in the Iron Bowl, not entirely his fault. But I'm just not ready to anoint him yet to second. I mean, he definitely, there's no reason he can't. And he's going to succeed because of the immense talent at Alabama surrounding him. But I just personally, when I was going through these rankings, I wanted just a little bit more of a sample size. He's a guy, of course, though, like I said, I wouldn't be shocked if he ended the season as a top quarterback in the SEC.
Yeah, like you said, I had him second. His numbers were incredibly good when he played. I mean, incredibly good. And you bring up the 2 throws against Auburn. If it wasn't for those 2 throws, the whole narrative of him would be completely different. Like everybody would look at him and say he's maybe going to be the best quarterback in the SEC this year. They probably maybe would have won the Iron Bowl and whatever. So, and I can't hold 2 throws against him all that much, especially on the road in the Iron Bowl, biggest game of the year, when he hasn't had that much playing experience before that. So he
still overall had a great game.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't want to penalize him so much for those 2 things. I mean, I didn't put him number 1, but fourth, it was about his 4th game of real playing time. And I don't know. I just think his stats were so good that I couldn't ignore him.
Yeah, and he went on to have a really good game against Michigan in the bowl game. So he fared pretty well against tough competition. I lean more towards Ryan than Trey, but just so for the listeners and the viewers, we're at number 5 right now, but 5-1 was the closest of any conference. So you could reasonably, I think, put any of these guys number 1. You could make the argument. It was kind of razor thin in the SEC.
Well, and Mac Jones isn't even a shoo-in for sure. I mean,
how could we get through this without bringing up Bryce Young, the 5-star quarterback coming in? Yeah, a lot of people think he'll overtake Jones, and especially if there was a full spring practice, that would be there'd be even more talk of that. But yeah, Mac Jones is not going to have a long leash. If he's even, maybe Young will just start day 1. Who knows?
True.
Okay. Who is number 4 on the list, Ryan?
Oh, whoops. I skipped a guy. KJ Costello. The Stanford transfer going to Mississippi State. It's tough to rank a transfer. It's not sure how it's going to fare there, but it certainly has all the physical tools you need to be successful. And I'd imagine Leach would probably get a lot out of him. And Leach obviously knows what he's doing. Didn't go the way he wanted to last year at Stanford. They struggled around him quite a bit. We kind of already touched on that previous episode. 2018, he was really, really good. He had some good weapons for sure. JJ Arcega-Whiteside and Caden Smith, I think, also were a couple of guys that they had that were really good there at Stanford. But it's Leach is he's got the tools, and I think Leach will be able to use them well. And he's a good quarterback. He's proven he's good. So I 4th or 5th, something sounds about right to me.
Yeah, I was the highest on him. I had him 2nd, just because I like what he did at Stanford. I kind of throw away a little bit of the beginning of last year for the reasons we talked about in the Pac-12 episode. And the 2 years before that, he was very 2018. You brought up that season. He was 2nd team All Pac-12. And entering last year, he was widely considered a top 10 or 15 quarterback nationally. So if you kind of give him an excuse for last year, give him a mulligan, then you might have him around there this year.
Yeah, and I've mentioned it in the past, but I was really impressed with Costello and how he improved while at Stanford. Obviously, now there's maybe a little bit of an injury concern, but I'm just more buying the marriage of Leach and pretty much any quarterback. I'm just so curious and anxious to see how it pans out, not only with Costello, but any quarterback that Leach has in Starkville and how it goes in the SEC.
Yeah, production wise, year one might be tough. I'm not sure about the receiving core there, and just he doesn't have the personnel for a Mike Leach offense yet. So I'm not sure if he'll put up huge numbers this year. Like obviously, I would have Mac Jones, even though I think I had Mac Jones one slot behind him in terms of these quarterback rankings. Mac Jones is going to have a better year. Like,
oh yeah, no doubt.
As long as he starts.
Yeah.
Okay, we are to number 3 on our list, and it is our brother, Jamie Newman, our younger bro. And I had him number 1 overall, actually. So, and which I think actually says more about the top of the SEC than really my opinion of Jamie Newman, because I'm not actually like incredibly high on him. I'm not totally buying into the hype, but I'll make my case for why I did have him number 1. So first off, he's a good runner. Over 500 yards rushing last year and 6 touchdowns. So that's an element he brings. And second, his passing stats last year overall were pretty solid, even though at the end of the year he tailed off. And Ryan, you've got an inquisitive look. You're about ready to rebut my argument. but okay, so I think there's excuses for the end of the year, because his best receiver, Jarrett, went down with an injury, season-ending injury. Another one of his top targets, Scotty Washington, went down around the same time, and that was shortly after Jamie Newman injured his shoulder. So all those factors combined, I think, helped to lead to a struggling second half of the year. So I like him. I think he's got a ton of talent, great arm, good running ability. The upside is huge.
Yeah, I just think people are overreacting to him a little here. Yeah, he was solid at Wake, but he there's no way he was elite to be a number 1 quarterback coming into the SEC this year. If you you look at his stats last year, if you just go to the ACC play, 56% completion percentage, 7 yards per attempt, 12 touchdowns, 9 picks. And keep in mind, that's the ACC. I mean, the ACC is terrible. And 14, he threw 14 pass attempts against Clemson. So it's not like that was a very small number. So it's not like that skewed the whole numbers all that much. That was just small attempts there, but he just wasn't that good. I know he maybe lost a player or two, but I mean, he's going up against much more challenging defenses week in, week out. This at Georgia and the SEC. So I think expectations really need to be tempered here. And I really can't put him at number 1.
I fall right in the middle of you guys. I hear both your arguments. Ryan, I guess if I had to say anything, yeah, the stats weren't all everything, but he was at Wake Forest, not a dominant school in the ACC, and he's gonna have a little bit more around him at Georgia. The other thing though is that it should be, I would think, actually an upgrade for Georgia, as Fromm just really unfortunately regressed last year. And if he blends well with that new offensive staff, there's no reason he can't be maybe even in the Heisman race. I'm not putting him as my Heisman front runner, but we know Georgia's defense is going to be insanely good, and they're going to be in the mix for the SEC. So there's no reason that he can't be the guy that at least plots them to Atlanta and maybe be in that race. But I agree. I didn't have him number 1.
Okay. All right. Well, let's go to someone that Ryan actually had.
Yeah. So this is crazy considering it comes from Ryan, but we got number 2. The Bros have Kellen Mond of Texas A&M. So I think Mond can still actually improve under another year of tutelage from Jimbo. The couple years of strong recruiting depth that Jimbo has accumulated should begin to pay dividends this year in College Station. Mond, he's put up huge numbers the last couple seasons. He leads all SEC quarterbacks in returning production. But man, Ryan, I couldn't help but notice you, of all people, a couple years later, have had Kellen Mond number 1. So what went into it for you?
It's been a long ride for good old Kellen and I. It's it's a long way away from when we were at UCLA. That's a few years ago. Anyways, I have number 1. I just feel like he's carried them the past couple years. They didn't have a 1,000-yard rusher this year. The ground game wasn't all that great. And his receivers, they were solid, but that is not what I would call an elite group of receivers. The other thing I like about him is he played well in the big games. They played 7 bowl teams this year. And in those games, he completed about 60% of his passes, 10 touchdowns, and just 4 picks. And keep in mind, they played Clemson, LSU, Georgia, Auburn, Alabama. I mean, that's 5 teams that finished in the top 14 of the rankings. He played against really, really tough competition. Didn't have the greatest support team staff, I guess, whatever you would call it. And yet he still played up good numbers against those good teams. The only bad game he had was LSU. He had a really bad game. But it's even in those stats that I just said. So, you compare those stats to contrast it to what Jamie Newman was doing against ACC teams. Wake played 1 team that finished in the top 40 of the AP poll, Clemson, and he was awful in that game. 1 team. That was the only team they played in the top 40.
Kellen Mond,
pretty good.
I wouldn't have Kellen Mond number 1, but even if you do have him number 1, I think that, again, goes to show you the lack of a proven elite quarterback in the SEC. Because, I mean, Kellen Mond is solid. He's a good runner. He's a decent passer. And especially when you adjust his stats for the strength of schedule, the passing stats would probably look better if he was going up against easier competition. But I don't know. To me, Kellen Mond just, like, I want to pick Texas A&M to make the playoff this year. I've been kind of, the beginning of last year, there were a lot of juniors, a lot of sophomores on Texas A&M. So it looked like, 2020 is the year that they're going to take this big step forward. And I do think they will, but in order to pick them to make the playoff, I feel like they've got a lot of the other pieces in place. I just have a little bit of doubt about Kellen Mond, that he's got that high of a ceiling. I think he's more of maybe a B+ quarterback. And I don't know. We'll see. Maybe he can prove me wrong a little bit this year. I mean, I think he's good, but
I kind of somewhat agree with you about this. I don't think there's an elite guy, no. Like Kellen Mond's really good.
Not one that we know of yet.
Yeah, exactly.
There's no Tua this year.
Exactly.
Right.
All right.
All right. We going to number 1 here?
Number 1.
I'm number 1, Kyle Trask. That is what a leap from a year from now. He's come a long way. I like Trask a lot. I had him 3rd, which it's not like he's far behind or anything. But the reason why I put him 3rd is just because he had really, really good talent around him this year. You look at the guys: Freddie Swain, Van Jefferson, Tyree Cleveland, Michael Pirine, all were drafted in the NFL, and those were skill players for Florida. And then you also had Kyle Pitts, who's a potential 1st rounder at tight end for this coming season. So ton of help around him. And I'll reference the Kellen Mond thing. Kellen Mond's best weapon was arguably Courtney Davis, who declared early and went to the NFL draft and didn't even get drafted. So the discrepancy in talent there was quite a bit. And that's why I couldn't put Trask above Kellen Mond. So yeah.
All right. Well, Trey, you had Trask number 1, so make your case.
Yeah, I mean, everyone knows by now I'm bullish on Mullen and the Gators, so maybe I was a little bit overly influenced by that, but I was just really impressed with Trask last year. He was thrust into that starting role, of course, as we talked about earlier, with Feleipe Franks going down. He ends up leading them to double-digit wins, an Orange Bowl victory. And I also really liked his moxie and how he played against the top teams. So against top 10 teams last year, he was pretty efficient in their games against Georgia, LSU, and Auburn. That's a pretty decent slate there, and he played pretty well, and he held his own. So now with a full offseason of him being the guy, maybe he can elevate the game a little bit more and take Florida to newer heights.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to argue against the numbers he put up. He put up numbers that justify him being this high. I had him a few slots lower, but like we said, any of these top 5 guys, you could make a case for number 1. But one interesting thing about Florida is Emory Jones at quarterback as the backup. Mullen really likes him. He's going to get some snaps for sure, but it wouldn't be the craziest thing if Emory Jones looks so good in those snaps to justify more and more.
Yeah. Yep. I agree.
Okay. Let's recap the SEC then. So I will pull up the list here shortly. What did you guys think of the SEC in general?
I thought it was extremely difficult at the top. I mean, I honestly could have put names in a hat and just picked up like Mac Jones. You could obviously make a case for top couple, but then you kind of worry if he's even going to be the guy. And then, yeah, it was just you just mix any of them up, and I wouldn't argue with you.
Yeah, I think there's a good group. I just don't think there's maybe there's no quite elite guys, or maybe the ones that we haven't seen be quite elite yet. But there's also, when you go towards the end, it's just there's still some pretty solid quarterbacks down there at the bottom.
Yeah, Terry Wilson being at 11, that's
yeah,
not bad.
I mean, he's led a team to a 10-3 year. So, I mean, yeah, and Hilinski could be, if he had the right group around him, could be all right. And so, yeah.
Well, how about of all these guys on this list, if everyone had the same odds, who would you bet to win the Heisman? You've got, I'll just list off the top 5 because they're probably the most reasonable ones. Kyle Trask, Kellen Mond, Jamie Newman, KJ Costello, and Mac Jones.
I mean, for me, I'm between Jones and Newman because I'm pretty confident Georgia and Alabama would be near the top of the SEC. I mean, Trask should, but I don't know if his numbers can really get there.
I might have to lean with Mac.
Yeah. I would go with Mac Jones too, just because of the talent around him. I mean, if he just puts up the numbers that he did when he played last year over Temple, he'd be in the running.
Oh yeah, no doubt. Yeah.
Okay. And obviously Bo Nix, I mean, he's going to have better Heisman odds than like a KJ Costello because
of course
he got the team around him and the expected to be 9 or 10 win team. But okay. That does it for the SEC then. Let's just do a brief review of the rankings throughout the week. So which conference do you think had the best quarterbacks?
Ooh. Tough call.
I know.
I think I have to go with the Big 12. I just think it's so deep. The amount of production that's coming back is amazing. I mean, you start at the top with Sam Ehlinger, Brock Purdy, Sanders, and then we're not even talking about Spencer Rattler, who has all the pedigree to become elite, and then even guys like Alan Bowman. So I liked the Big 12.
Yeah, it's tough. To me, I was going between the Big 12, as you see there, or the SEC as the best. I think I'm actually going to agree with you on Trey, though. I think I'd go with the Big 12. They really only have one quarterback that I don't feel particularly good about. All the other 9 guys I would be fine going to bat with, and it's just a deep group. And Purdy, I mean, he's one of the best in the country. So yeah, I'd probably lean towards the Big 12.
Yeah, like you said, the only situation, the only team that's great about their quarterback is probably Kansas with Myles Kendrick at 10th. This was a tough one because I want to bring up the ACC now.
If you just take the top 5
bottom
guys.
half. Yeah, exactly. The bottom half is bad, so I'm not going to pick the ACC. But I'll bring up this top 5 again. Trevor Lawrence, Sam Howell, Mikhail Cunningham, De'Aaron King, and Hendon Hooker. That is really tough to beat.
The ACC totally surprised me. They're impressive. Not necessarily the teams, but just the quarterbacks themselves. It's a good list.
Yeah, but overall, as far as the best, I'm going to agree with you guys. I'm going to say the Big 12 just because, and I know there's 10 teams, but 9 of them have pretty solid situations. So it was close, but Big 12. Okay, how about the worst situation, the worst conference of quarterbacks?
Believe it or not, I'm gonna say the Big Ten.
Ooh.
Justin Fields and Tanner Morgan, I'm pretty comfortable with at the top. But there's just so many guys, as we discussed in the Big Ten episode, that are kind of boom or bust. Really, the whole middle, it's a back end. It's like there's little experience to go off of and project. And top to bottom, I was just at this point before the season, I was a little bit underwhelmed considering how good the conference generally usually is.
Yeah, I guess I gotta agree with Trey again.
Okay, wow.
Big Ten. I'm not confident in it. It's just like you said, those top two guys are really good. But I when we talked about this when we were doing the Big Ten rankings a couple days ago, and we brought it up, and at the end, I was like, you can poke holes in a lot of these quarterbacks, and just you have worries. You don't just feel super confident in all of them. Really, Morgan and Fields are it. And so. I think I'm the least confident with the Big Ten. I mean, the ACC, it's weird just because the ACC is such a separation of powers. It's like, how do you judge that? It's like ranking, like saying which conference is the best just overall. It's like, well, I mean, obviously the SEC, but outside of that, it's like, how do you decipher the top teams when you have such a big group of maybe bad teams at the bottom? So
right,
it's hard to do that.
It's what's your criteria, but. For me, I went. You guys are making a good case for the Big Ten, but I went with the Pac-12, just because I think that bottom is potentially weak. With when you got Dorian Thompson-Robinson at 7th, and I don't feel very good about him. I don't think that's a great sign. And the top end, I like that Keaton Slovis, Jaden Daniels, Chase Garbers, but I don't think it's great enough to carry the rest of the group. So, I don't think there was a clear answer here, though. I don't think any conference is head and shoulders above any other in terms of quarterback play this year.
No, not when you look at the whole shebang. But if you do like the top 5 thing that you brought up, I think you can kind of maybe separate a couple of them.
Mm-hmm. All right. Wow. That's it. We went through.
We did it.
Very happy that we have made it through quarterbacks week. If you haven't seen our head coach rankings, we also did that maybe a month or two ago. So check that out on our YouTube or just in your podcast app. And if you could retweet these episodes as I post them on Twitter throughout the week as I did, please let people know what we're doing. If you like the show, share links to the episodes on Reddit or your local team's message board. We'd really appreciate that. And let us know what you think of our rankings. I'm looking forward to it. SEC fans are passionate, so bring it on. All right. Talk to you next week.
Good stuff. Good job.
All right.
You've been listening to the College Football Bros. If you have any questions for the next podcast, email them to collegefootballbros@gmail.com. Keep up with the brothers on social media, like them on Facebook at College Football Bros, follow them on Instagram at College Football Bros, and for their commentary on Saturdays, follow them on Twitter at CFB Bros. Thanks for listening.